Hello, this is Brenda Wicker, and this is my Shapes walkthrough with CSS for WDD 331. I decided to work with the talk bubble shape. I took the coding that was there at CSSTricks.com, and they had a talk bubble, and so the first div ID I have here is basically their coding. I changed a few little things to make it work. I had to give it a positioning of relative, and I gave it a margin of 20 pixels to move it down the screen a little bit, and then auto so that it would center so it was easier to look at. The first part of the coding here is just the div, and this is a rectangle, 120 pixels wide, 80 pixels high. If you wanted a square instead, of course, or bigger, smaller, whatever you wanted, just change these numbers and it changes. So there you go. Now you've got a square. We're going to stick with the rectangle for this bit. I gave it gold instead of the red. The border radius is what's rounding the corners. If you wanted this to be an oval, 80 pixels would make it oval. Let's stick with what they did. So that's your basic beginning of your talk bubble. And then we added some styling to the after element. You start with an empty content to give it something to style as a block level element. I gave it an absolute position because you want it to stay in place right next to the previous position thing, which is our main talk bubble. The next few things, the right and the top, that determines where this ends up placed. And then these last three, this middle one is our color, and I'm going to change that so you can see. It's actually handy to change the color if you're moving it around or changing it. For example, if we want to change the angle of that, you just change those numbers around and play with it, and you get to change your little triangle there. So I played around with that so I could understand it. But now what I want to do is show you where I went with it. I decided to make a Google Hangouts icon. So let me show you that. So again, you start with your main div talk bubble. I wanted a round one, so I went with 80 pixels by 80 pixels. Changed the color of the background, did the 80 pixel border radius, so now it's circle. The next thing that I did was the quote marks that go inside the Google Hangouts. Again, we need some content, but in this case I actually wanted quote marks, so I started with the single quotes surrounding the double quotes. Color white. I played around until I found a font family that the quote marks looked similar enough to the Google Hangouts quotes. And then all of these I played with. So the position absolute, you want it to stay in reference to the previous one. So that's why you want position absolute. Font size, right, top, you just play with those. It all depends on which font family you picked and how big it was. This last one, transform, rotate, I had to add that in because for this font it actually was upside down. So I had to change that around. The last thing that we need is our little triangular arrow piece. And again, empty content. The previous one was before and this one is after, just so that you're styling two different things. Again, position absolute. Changing around the right and the top amounts, moved it around. I'll go ahead and show you. It changes where it goes. So I fiddled with those until I had it positioned right where I wanted it. Same thing with the border top, border right, border bottom. I just changed those around until I had the shape that I wanted, made it the same color. And I had to transform rotate so that it wasn't on the left side, that it was pointing down. So that's what I did. I think it turned out rather well, and you could now you have a Google Hangouts icon that's just part of your CSS, and you don't have to import in a separate picture file. I hope you enjoyed that.